And to break down everything that's been discussed about climate at the UN this week, we're joined by Aris Papadopoulos from the Resilience Action Fund. He's also the author of the book Resilience-nomics, Value in an Age of Disaster. Aris, great having you. And first off, China promised to cut emissions up to 10% by 2035. Is this a game changer?
Well, every percent counts, but I'd like to say there are two sides to the coin. One side is reducing greenhouse gases, which we call mitigation. The other side is making our built assets more hazard resistance, which is adaptation, and we need both. In fact, if we don't have resilient assets, we're not going to achieve our green goals.
And Aris, with the U.S. absent from climate talks, how does that affect the global conversation on all these measures that need to be taken?
Well, fortunately, on the topic of resilience, of strengthening our assets, there seems to be more of a consensus across all political the political spectrum. And even though the participation has been low, there's action to strengthen assets, which I have been personally involved with, both in the U.S. and overseas. And the World Bank and IFC are a big part of that, having developed an index for resilience called the Building Resilience Index.
Yes, you actually talk about trillions needed for climate finance. Where's that money coming from?
Well, I like to say that we need to tap into the mainstream of funding. In other words, there's about $15 trillion a year spent on built assets. And that money has to to be raised to a higher standard to be both, let's say, green and resilient. But we need a better way to measure that. And that's where the Building Resilience Index provides a tangible solution.
And there's another angle to this, because China is the biggest green investor right now, right? How do you count that, and how do you see that?
Well, definitely China is a big investor, both domestically and internationally. And if they can make sure that their investments are both green and resilient, both domestically and internationally, they will go a long way to helping in this effort. And I know they're looking at the Building Resilience Index. I hope they adopt it in both their as a domestic standard and as an international standard.
And Aris, there's something I want to look at, and I want to hear your thinking about. There are risks here, right? Like greenwashing, debt traps. How real are those concerns?
They are real. Fortunately, when it comes to resilience, to hazard resistance, the tester is Mother Nature. Nature will test the resistance of whatever we build, a house, a city, infrastructure, etc. And therefore, the metric that I mentioned, the Building Resilience Index, is very robust. Unfortunately, we don't have a similar metric for green buildings. And that's probably in the area where a lot of greenwashing is happening today, and we need it.
Yes, absolutely, because a lot of what many report as effective investment or want to use and leverage in international fora is actually greenwashing, right? How do you tackle that?
Yeah, there you need basically better standards for the green side. And as I mentioned, on the resilience side, the global standard today, in my view, is International Finance Corp, IFC's Building Resilience Index. But we don't have such a global standard on the green side, and we need it. I hope the UN or some other group can come up with that.
And Aris, let's talk about the bottom line here. Do you think the world is moving forward on climate without the United States? Is it off the conversation?
Well, I think the United States is a participant, even though not directly. They are doing a lot of things domestically and in their investments overseas to try to become more hazard resistant. So I think the activity of the private sector, the business sector, still remains strong in that area. And I think everyone realizes that a resilient investment something that will withstand the hazards, will be less costly, have lower insurance, and will be more valuable in the future. And that's what's going to drive markets to change.